Chicago Schools investigation prompts new looks at sex abuse in K-12 schools.
More than 3,000 Uber sexual assaults reported last year. And man who sexually assaulted woman on the street tells
Riverdale's
police it's
Camila
her
Mendes
fault. She
opens
should
up
have
on how
covered
she
that.
coped in
ICE
aftermath of
agent
sexual assault.
repeatedly
An online
raped
survey launched
and
in
impregnated
January by a
immigrant
nonprofit
for
called
7
Stop
years
New sexual assault
while
rules
threatening
favor the
deportation lawsuit
Repeatedly
claimed
mounted
34% of people who
ignored
sexually
her
abuse a
past
child
experience
are
some
family
form of sexual
members of
harassment.
that child.
My very first catcall was when I was, I think, 12 or 13, and I was just walking down the street with my mom, and it was the summer, and I was wearing shorts, and I was really excited because I was like, it's finally warm. And then some guy on the street just yelled, like, nice shorts, baby, and I didn't know what to do. I felt frozen and really disgusted, and I just kind of went into a little shell because it just ruined my whole entire day.
I often hear people talking about sexual violence and sexual harassment in a negative way on social media or in school.
I feel like sometimes people like to sweep it under the blanket because they find it uncomfortable to talk about, but I just don't think that sexual harassment should be something that is uncomfortable to talk about, especially if people need the support of their community.
I think there's just a stigma around it, and also it's just there's a lot of people are really ignorant about it when they talk about it. They don't realize how much of an impact it actually has on the victims.
There are people who take it really seriously and other people who just joke about it and think that it's okay to joke about it.
Especially on social media, such as TikTok. If you look at some of the comments, sometimes you'll see comments that literally will say she's asking to be raped.
A lot of people don't realize that they're being sexually harassed. They just think it's part of normal everyday life.
These lines shouldn't be hard to define, but it's becoming apparent that we have to define them.
So many high schools have never had any sort of education at all about consent.
Schools are really uncomfortable with that topic, and they don't know how to help students and be supportive.
We just finished our relationships unit, and there was nothing about rape or sexual harassment or even catcalling.
Young girls are often the target of so much harassment, girls as young as 12, 13, a lot of teenagers.
I walk to and from school, so I've been yelled at a lot. And people have thrown stuff at me, they bark at me all the time. I'll be carrying my backpack and my big giant swim bag, and they'll just be tossing garbage at me.
I was in the library with some friends and they were telling me about their experiences, and one of my friends was like, oh yeah, so I was walking on the street and these guys catcalled me, and being her, she swore at him and stuff, and then and he ended up following her in his car for a couple of blocks.
I was in 6th or 7th grade, and I was outside walking my friend to her car while we were at my house, and my neighbor, who I'd known for a while, had his friend over, and as I was walking back, I was wearing shorts, and I heard them whistle at me, and I didn't really know what to do because I always thought I'd say something back or stand up to them, but I just kind of ran away.
From the time I was even in 5th grade, I've received catcalls, weird sexual comments, older men who are 20 years plus my age, DMing me on Instagram.
I think kind of in fear of that happening to me, my defense mechanism is really to kind of stay to myself and put my earbuds in, look down, and don't make really any contact with any other people.
The fact that that happens to so many people every single day, all the time, it just breaks my heart because I hated the way I felt, and I hate the way I feel whenever I get catcalled.
And it's always one of the scariest things, and you get really freaked out in the moment. You don't really know how to act in that situation.
I think as a woman, there's always that place where you feel a little vulnerable. I was almost molested myself at a very young age, at 12. Later on in life, I found out that my mom had been assaulted many times as a young foster kid.
My mother was sexually assaulted. My sister was sexually assaulted. Most of my partners in my life were sexually assaulted. Probably 8 out of 10 of my friends have been sexually assaulted. I've heard stories of sexual assaults from probably 50 different high school students along the way.
It's important to surround yourself around people that you feel are going to be supportive and that will help you. In my personal situation, it was my mom, and she listened to my voice, and so often that doesn't happen.
It's very common in my community, sexual assault and domestic violence and all of the sort. We live in a world where you can just do what you want to do with women. Man, one of every, I say, 5 or 6 girls that I have interfaced with have told me about some assault that they probably experienced. It makes me scared for my daughter.
We don't do a good job of helping kids understand how to negotiate relationships and attraction in a way that is empowering and respectful of everyone.
If you have to stop and think about if it's an appropriate place or not, then it might not be an appropriate place.
We must ask for consent at every new level of intimacy, and we must ask again, and we must receive an enthusiastic yes.
At my school, the administration does a lot to try to make sure that people are talking about, sexual violence and consent in like a healthy way. And so we have the consent assembly where we learn about consent, obviously, and how to have healthy relationships and what makes like a good relationship.
The consent assembly is something that started in 2006 at Piedmont High School. There was a reported rape in the Piedmont community, and we were basically told as teachers not to talk about it because it was an ongoing investigation, and I wanted to talk about it somehow. I then found some students, sadly, who had been assaulted in my class, and they told me their stories, and basically I then used those first 3 stories to create the consent assembly.
There's about maybe 10 kids who stand on stage and they read out stories that are anonymous.
Because it's important to like be talking about like sex and sexuality and the way that people could be giving consent or not be giving consent, because there's like a lot of ways that people could not be giving their consent that aren't just saying no.
When our body responds to trauma, we have fight, flight, or freeze. And often we think about fight or flight, but we don't talk that much about freeze. So let's say somebody is having something traumatic happen to them and they're freezing. It might, in a sexual situation, a freeze may seem like someone is not saying no. And so then a perpetrator could then take that as, oh, they didn't say no, so it's okay to continue doing what I think I'm doing.
The Time's Up movements were like brought to my attention, obviously by like the Golden Globes, when all of the actresses and all the females that were there, they wore their black dresses or just like black clothing, and they had their pins. And I thought that was so cool that they were like standing up for what they believed in, and that they were using their platforms to like, talk about it.
I would say I definitely did find it heartbreaking and disturbing at first, just because even though it happened to me and it has happened to people that I've known, I still kind of couldn't wrap around my head that like these women who I saw on like the big screen, who I thought to be like these untouchable, like powerful, badass women, that the same thing could happen to them. And so that was kind of scary for me, but at the same time it made me feel less alone.
I had the opportunity to see Ms. Burke actually talk about starting the Me Too movement in her social work with young black women.
I think the main intentions of the movement are to show that it's not okay to sexually harass people, and that they will get called out for it, and that they will suffer the consequences.
People can be allies to the Me Too and Time's Up movements by, one, knowing that this is a serious problem and it's wrong, and also to if anybody comes up to them, if they hear stories, to always be supportive of the victim and never judgmental or blaming the victim.
I'm glad that people know that it's not their fault, because I think there's a lot of shame in being assaulted or somebody harassing you, and I think that it's really important for women, and I will say boys too, because it happens to men as well, to feel like they have a voice and that it's not their fault. And if there's anything that I think this movement has done, is it's given people that, and I'm really happy that that's happened.
With the Me Too movement, bringing like people's voices into the light and like having their stories finally being able to be told, and like having that opportunity to like voice what they have to say.
The most powerful part of street harassment is the words, because so many people say, oh, it's just words, it's no big deal. You're not getting hurt in any way because it's just words. So I wanted to highlight that these words have a huge impact and actually write them down on the streets where they were happening to show people, you know, wow, these words have a huge impact on people walking down the street. And we get all sorts of reactions. So the most positive reactions are when people stop and say, I've actually experienced something similar. I get this a lot. Thank you so much for writing it down. You know, this is so powerful. A lot of people get really excited about the project. They'll take out their phones and follow us on Instagram. But then we also get a huge amount of negative responses. So people are sometimes so shocked by the words that they get angry at us for writing them down. And then, you know, we always explain it's for a project, this was said to someone, but sometimes they'll still say, you know, it's completely inappropriate to write this, what if kids see it? And the irony there is, of course, it's already being said on the streets, in public spaces. So that really frustrates me when people are so upset about the vulgar words, because for so many of us, that's a reality we face every day. I think some men specifically feel like they could be under attack because of the Me Too movement.
I don't want people to perceive this movement as something where women just have an excuse to yell at men. It's just a movement to bring those who have committed this crime and hold them accountable.
We have Brett Kavanaugh, who like sexually assaulted someone, and like knowing that in our like Supreme Court, like that is like a fundamental part of our government, that there is someone who like has committed sexual assault. Like as a woman, that is a very like scary thing to think about.
Me and like 4 of my good friends, we all rapped in high school. And around 2009, when we graduated, we decided that this is going to be the way for us to stick together. So we created, at the time it was Mercer Entertainment, right? And it was a rap group. After time went by and I like was waking up and understanding a lot of things about social issues and stuff, I started to let go of what it means to entertain people and started to hold on what it means to educate and inform people. We have a lot of codes that we go by. A lot of those codes we go by have to do with what it means to be a righteous man. Like just the idea of a man is misconstrued in so many ways by, you know, what it means massively to be a man. It's not really an attractive idea. So we're just trying to not recreate it, but just like bring the values of what makes a man back, you know, a positive man, you know, not just any man. So when it comes to assault, I just can't really even fathom why a man would ever think that they can do that.
I'm hoping that at a certain point that it stops happening. I'm hoping that at a certain point everybody around us will feel less alone. I'm hoping that we will learn a new way to be with each other. I'm so grateful that the high school students of today are able to start the conversation.
I know that like the film industry definitely is not the most supportive environment a lot of the time for women, and that is definitely scary because I know I want to go there into that industry, but I know that it might not have the most supportive environment for me.
Going into the film industry, knowing kind of what I know now and after, and kind of like in the wake of the Me Too movement, it's definitely scary. It's nerve-wracking.
Many women are not represented, especially if women work really hard and try to get to the same place as men.
My fears are basically that I will always be, I guess, outnumbered. I feel that in my video production class every day, the guys don't do anything to me. They leave me alone. You know, they don't really, they don't do anything, but it's still just that overlying feeling of like isolation.
As a woman, and especially as a woman of color, like I have had a lot of fears about going into the film industry because it is really run by like old white men.
There was the Harvey Weinstein issue and other issues regarding sexual harassment and assault within the film industry.
He was in a high enough position and there were people around him and he had enough friends that were also in high positions that they protected him and they kind of allowed that to happen. It's really scary.
Being like a minority like makes it harder for people to like get in to the industries that they need to get in and like get to like higher positions of power. And I think that it's really terrible that like the film industry especially is one that enforces like white supremacy and, you know, especially like not holding men accountable for their actions. And I think that it's not only men that need to be held accountable for their actions always, it's everyone, but especially in this case.
In the film industry, it is pretty prominent that women are not represented, and even non-binary people are not represented fairly, because there are so many amazing people who are being typecasted or like being written to be very one-dimensional. And I think knowing that, I want to change that.
But at the same time, it also kind of drives me more, knowing that like, if like I can't let this stop me, if I want to see progress, both behind the camera and in front of it, that I have to like do it and be a part of it myself.
There's not an overnight solution to like fighting sexual assault and harassment and like, but we have to keep speaking up about it.